Let's imagine a hypothetical situation in which you are stuck at home, unable to go to school or work, very bored, and with lots of time on your hands, and you're looking for a new hobby that you can do while you, say, sit and watch YouTube videos in place of doing schoolwork. Funnily enough, I was in a very similar position to this 14 years ago when I was about 7 years old, and for reasons lost to the annals of time, I became enthralled with knitting. I then struggled to teach myself how to knit using ill-suited materials and learning from books with poor illustrations and confusing instructions. My 7-year-old will prevailed over my obstacles, but many people's will not, and knitting being a tactile skill is easiest to learn when someone can teach you in a hands-on manner. Finding someone to teach you to knit in the middle of a quarantine, however, can be problematic. But fear not, I learned how to knit without help, and so can you. The first thing to consider when learning how to knit are supplies, primarily yarn and needles. There's also scissors and a tapestry needle, as well as zillions of other specialized tools. But for now, let's focus on these. First, let's talk about needles. The humble straight needle is all you need to know about for now. Forget about circular needles, forget about double-pointed needles, and if that's the first time you've ever heard of those things, forget I mentioned them. For a beginner, I recommend US size 8 to 10 metal needles. Bigger needles like these US size 19s might feel easier now, but they'll make it more difficult for you to adjust to smaller needles down the road. And smaller needles like these US size 4s will only frustrate you. Now, why metal? Well, it's cheaper and more durable than bamboo, with a better texture and weight than plastic. Now, for yarn, as for needles, something cheap, durable, and easy to work with is ideal. Plain old Red Heart Super Saver is perfect. It's 100% acrylic, meaning it's machine washable, it's not too rough but won't slide around on your needles, and it's about $3 a skein. Any other 100% acrylic yarn that says worsted weight on the label would work just fine as well. There are many different weights and plies of yarn made out of countless materials, but try and avoid getting bogged down with information at this stage, and simply know that you'll be working with yarns of this type for a while. Now comes the part where we actually learn how to knit. The first step in any project is to cast on. Casting on is the process by which you use one of a variety of methods to establish your first row of stitches. I'm going to show you 2 different methods to cast on. One of these methods is easier but makes for a difficult to knit first row and a somewhat untidy looking finished product. The second method is slightly more difficult to get the hang of, but makes a better finished product and an easier to knit first row. To start off any cast on, we make a slip knot. Just take your yarn in front of you, twist it to make a loop, and then pull one of the ends of your yarn through the loop, making an adjustable knot which you then just slip on to the ends of one of your needles. Again, take your yarn, make a loop, and pull one end through. This will be your first stitch. Now, the first and inferior of the 2 cast-on methods is called the slip-on cast-on. With your needle in your right hand and your yarn in your left, wrap the yarn around your thumb, slide your needle through this loop, and slide it off your thumb and onto your needle, lightly pulling to adjust. Repeat this process again and again until you have the desired number of stitches. The second cast-on, the long tail cast-on, starts with a slip knot as well, but as the name suggests, when you go to make your slip knot, you leave a long tail of yarn trailing from one end of the knot. We'll differentiate between these 2 strands of yarn by calling the one that leads to the ball of yarn the working yarn, and by calling the loose end the tail. Now, with the needle in your right hand, take both the working yarn and the tail in your left hand. Watch very carefully as I make a loop with the tail and use my needle to pull the working yarn through this loop and onto my needle. Repeat this until you have however many stitches your heart desires. 10 is a good start. Congratulations on completing the steps up till now. The next part is the knit stitch, which is how the body of knitted works get made. To start, take the needle that holds all your wonderful stitches and hold it in your left hand, with your empty needle in your right hand. You want to hold them close to the ends to give you more control, somewhat in the same manner you might hold a knife. Then insert the tip of your right needle into the first stitch on your left needle, and using your right hand, wrap the working yarn around your right needle. Now use your right needle to pull that yarn through your first stitch and gently pull the first stitch of off your left needle. Again, right needle into left stitch, wrap yarn around right needle, pull the yarn through the stitch and slide that stitch off the needle. Repeat for the remaining row of stitches, and then just switch hands and continue knitting for however many rows your heart desires. To finish a project, we need to do what's called casting off. Like casting on, there's a variety of different methods, but the most very basic one will work well for a long time. To begin, knit the first 2 stitches on a row of knitting. Then, using your left needle, slide it into the back stitch on your right needle and pull the back stitch up and over the front stitch and off your needle. Now, knit 1 stitch so that you once again have 2 stitches on your right needle, and repeat these steps until you come to the very last stitch. Then, just snip your yarn, leaving a long tail, and bring it all the way through your last stitch, pulling it taut. Congratulations! You have finished your first project. Now go off into the world and make things.